Friends, I stand before you today to declare something that can change the course of your life forever. There is a wisdom higher than man's knowledge. There is an understanding greater than education, deeper than science, richer than experience. It is the wisdom of the Almighty, and there is only one way to tap into it, through prayer. Now listen to me closely, because what I'm about to tell you is the dividing line between confusion and clarity, between wandering and walking in destiny, between stumbling through life and rising to victory. Too many are searching in books and people and the noise of this world for answers, yet they remain restless, empty, and directionless. Why? Because wisdom is not discovered in the dust of man's opinions. Wisdom is released when your spirit connects to God through prayer. Prayer is not just words. Prayer is a lifeline. Prayer is stepping out of human limitation and into divine revelation. When you kneel down, heaven opens up. When you call on His name, answers begin to flow. And when answers come, confusion must flee, fear must bow, and the crooked places of your life are made straight. Let me tell you why you must lean in and stay with me to the very end of this message, because what you're about to hear has the power to pull you out of the maze of uncertainty you've been trapped in. Some of you have been crying out, what do I do next? Where do I go? How do I solve this? And today, by the Spirit of God, you are going to discover the secret to connecting with divine wisdom that will not just guide you through this moment, it will transform the rest of your life. Prayer is where strength is renewed. Prayer is where burdens are lifted. Prayer is where heaven downloads strategies that no man could ever give you. Prayer is where the mysteries of life unravel and the voice of God becomes louder than the chaos of this world. And let me say this to you. Your greatest battles will never be won in the boardroom, in the classroom, or even in the courtroom. They will be won in the prayer room, because prayer connects you to wisdom that is above every circumstance, greater than every enemy, and stronger than every obstacle. Stay with me, don't turn away, because before this message is over, you will see that the wisdom of God is waiting for you, not tomorrow, not next year, but right now. And when you learn to touch heaven through prayer, you will never walk blind again. Prayer is not just talking, it's connecting to the infinite source of wisdom. Too often when people hear the word prayer, they imagine it as nothing more than a routine, a set of words repeated into the air, or an obligation to check off from a spiritual list. But prayer is infinitely more than that. Prayer is the opening of the heart to a source far greater than ourselves, a source that has existed before the foundation of the world and will exist long after the world passes away. Prayer is the direct link between the limited human mind and the infinite divine mind. When you pray, you are not simply speaking, you are reaching upward, tapping into the eternal reservoir of wisdom that only God possesses. It is not a monologue, it is a lifeline, a sacred channel where heaven's wisdom flows into your life in ways you cannot imagine until you experience it. Think for a moment about the limitations of human knowledge. We pride ourselves on intelligence, education, and innovation. Yet for every answer mankind discovers, 1,000 new questions emerge. Science gives us tools, but it cannot give us peace. Technology gives us convenience, but it cannot give us purpose. Books can fill our shelves with ideas, but they cannot fill the void in our hearts. Wisdom that comes from man is temporary, fragile, and often contradictory. One day a theory is praised, the next it is disproven. But when you pray, you touch a wisdom that is eternal, unshackable, and unchanging. You connect with the mind of God Himself, the source of all knowledge, the designer of the universe. That kind of wisdom cannot be shaken by time, by circumstance, or by doubt. Prayer is not about sending words upward. It is about drawing wisdom downward. It is not simply about asking for what you want. It is about aligning yourself with what God already knows is best for you. When you pray, your heart tunes itself to the frequency of heaven, and in that tuning comes clarity. Questions that once left you restless are answered. Situations that once overwhelmed you become manageable. You begin to see not with natural eyes, but with spiritual insight, and suddenly the impossible begins to look possible. The obstacles you thought were permanent mountains reveal themselves as temporary hills, and the wisdom of God shows you the path forward. Many times people say, I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. I'm at the end of myself. That is exactly where prayer steps in, because prayer takes you beyond yourself. You are not confined to your own ideas or experiences. You are connected to the Infinite One who has no boundaries. Through prayer, you are not leaning on your own understanding. You are leaning on the everlasting arms of the One who sees the end from the beginning. That is why prayer is so powerful. It moves you from confusion to clarity, from despair to hope, from weakness to strength, and from wandering to direction. Consider the times in your life when decisions weighed heavily on you. Maybe it was a choice about your career, your family, your future. People around you had opinions. Some said one thing, others said another, but deep inside you still felt unsettled. That is because human wisdom can only go so far. But when you enter into prayer, when you pour out your heart and then listen, something supernatural happens. It is as if heaven whispers into your soul, giving you the direction you need, the confidence you lacked, and the peace that no human counsel could ever provide. That is divine wisdom. That is the gift prayer brings. Prayer also reveals what human wisdom cannot. Human wisdom may tell you what is visible, but divine wisdom shows you the unseen. Prayer unlocks mysteries, exposes hidden traps, and reveals opportunities that the natural eye would never catch. It positions you to be in the right place at the right time, not by chance, but by divine orchestration. The greatest leaders, the strongest men and women of faith throughout history, were not great because of their strength alone. They were great because they prayed. They prayed until the heavens opened, until wisdom descended, and until their path was illuminated with divine direction. When you pray, you are connecting with the ultimate source of creativity, strategy, and guidance. Prayer is the Wi-Fi of heaven. It is the connection point that links your small device of a human mind to the vast, limitless network of divine wisdom. Without prayer, you are disconnected offline, stumbling through life with no signal. With prayer, your spirit is online, fully connected, downloading wisdom that transforms your thoughts, your decisions, and your destiny. That is why it is impossible to walk in the fullness of life without prayer. To neglect prayer is to choose confusion. But to embrace prayer is to choose wisdom. Some may say, but I don't know how to pray. I don't know the words to say. Let me tell you, prayer is not about eloquence. It is not about memorizing phrases or repeating lines. It is about sincerity. It is about opening your heart with honesty, saying, God, I need you. I need your wisdom. Guide me, show me, teach me. That raw sincerity is what connects you to heaven. God is not impressed by vocabulary. He is moved by authenticity. The moment you sincerely reach out, the channel opens and wisdom begins to flow. And let us be clear, this wisdom is not just for spiritual matters alone. It touches every area of life. It is wisdom for relationships, for business, for health, for decisions, for dreams. Prayer brings divine strategies that outmatch human planning every time. There are ideas waiting for you in prayer that can shift your career. There are solutions waiting for you in prayer that can save your family. There is peace waiting for you in prayer that can heal your soul. Everything you are searching for begins at the place of prayer, because prayer is the only connection that plugs you directly into the infinite wisdom of God. This is why I say, prayer is not just talking, it is connecting. And when you connect, you are no longer walking blindly. You are walking with insight, foresight, and the assurance that comes from knowing your steps are guided by wisdom far greater than your own. That is why the wisest choice any man or woman can make is the choice to pray. For in prayer you are not just speaking into the air, you are entering into the very mind of God. And when you walk out of that place of connection, you walk with answers, with courage, with clarity, and with the kind of wisdom that makes the impossible possible. Every answer you seek is already in the presence of God. Prayer is the channel to receive it. This truth, if embraced, can revolutionize the way a person views life's challenges, decisions, and uncertainties. Too often, people run in circles searching for answers in every possible place except the one where they already exist. They consult friends, they scroll endlessly through advice columns, they chase after mentors, and they bury themselves in books. Yet the gnawing emptiness remains. That emptiness is not because answers do not exist. It is because they are looking in the wrong place. The answers they crave have already been prepared, already been stored, and already been designed by the Creator Himself. The only problem is that those answers are not accessible through human striving, but through divine connection. And prayer is the only channel that opens the vault of heaven's wisdom into a person's life. Imagine for a moment a great library that contains every piece of knowledge, every strategy, every insight, and every solution to the questions of your life. This library exists in the presence of God, and it is not bound by time, space, or limitation. Whatever you are struggling with today, the solution is already written and waiting there. Whatever you will face tomorrow, the path through it has already been designed there. You do not need to invent your answer. You need to access it. And the only key to unlock that divine library is prayer. Prayer is the access card, the password, the key that opens the door. Without it, the library may exist, but you will stand outside lost, confused, and searching for scraps of wisdom from people who are just as limited as you are. There is such a profound relief that comes when you finally understand this truth. You no longer have to live in panic. You no longer have to strive as if life is some unsolvable puzzle. You no longer have to believe the lie that you are alone or abandoned without direction, because every answer already exists. God does not improvise. He does not wait for you to cry out before He begins searching for a plan. The plan is already complete. The answer is already available. The way forward is already clear in His presence. What prayer does is not create answers, it reveals them. Prayer opens your eyes to see what God has already prepared for you. This is why so many who neglect prayer end up living in circles of frustration. They feel as if they are constantly running after something but never catching it. They may even achieve moments of success, but the satisfaction is fleeting because they are still operating on partial wisdom. Divine wisdom is not about fragments or guesses, it is about completeness. When you pray, you are not chasing an answer, you are receiving what has already been perfectly designed for you. Prayer is not about invention, but about revelation. Think of the great figures throughout history who lived with divine wisdom. They did not stumble upon it accidentally. They prayed. They knelt before God, they poured out their hearts, and in return, they received instructions, strategies, and revelations that changed the course of nations, families, and even generations. Moses did not part the Red Sea because he was a genius. He prayed and received the instruction to stretch out his staff. Daniel did not interpret the dreams of kings because he studied harder than others. He prayed, and the secrets were revealed to him. These stories are not meant to remain locked in ancient history. They are living testimonies of what prayer does. It takes you into the presence where answers already exist and delivers them into your spirit so you can act upon them. When you understand that every answer already exists in God's presence, it changes how you pray. Prayer is no longer desperate begging, it is confident accessing. You are not wondering if God will hear you, you know He already has the solution. Prayer shifts from anxiety to expectation. It becomes less about trying to twist God's arm and more about positioning yourself to receive what He has already prepared. You begin to pray with boldness, with faith, and with the assurance that wisdom will come, because you are connecting to the source where all wisdom resides. One of the most beautiful aspects of prayer is that the answers you receive are not limited to what you think you need. Sometimes you ask for one thing, and God shows you something completely different because He knows the root of the issue better than you do. You may be praying for provision, but the wisdom He gives you is not just a financial breakthrough, but a new perspective on stewardship. You may be praying for a relationship to be healed, but the wisdom He reveals is not merely reconciliation, but a deeper understanding of love and forgiveness. Prayer goes beyond surface solutions. It delivers the depth of divine wisdom that transforms not just your circumstances, but also your character. There is a reason why human solutions often feel temporary. A person can fix a leak, but if the foundation is cracked, another problem will appear. Human wisdom treats symptoms, but divine wisdom addresses causes. Through prayer, God reveals not just the immediate answer, but the eternal one. He shows you the path that doesn't just resolve today's issue, but safeguards tomorrow's destiny. That is why those who pray walk with a sense of stability. Even when storms rage, they are unshaken, because they know they are not grasping for answers, they are walking in revelation. Prayer also teaches you patience, because divine wisdom does not always come in your timing. Sometimes the answer is ready, but you are not. Sometimes the wisdom exists, but your heart needs preparation to receive it. That is why prayer is a process of alignment. As you pray, your desires, your will, and your perspective begin to shift. You begin to see that God's wisdom is not about quick fixes, but about eternal truth. And when the answer finally comes, you are ready to handle it, walk in it, and steward it well. Many of the greatest breakthroughs people long for are often just one prayer away. That healing, that clarity, that solution, it is already in the presence of God, waiting to be delivered into their lives. The tragedy is not that answers do not exist. The tragedy is that people stop short of prayer and try to rely on their own strength. But the invitation is always open. God is always ready. The vault of divine wisdom is never locked to those who knock, seek, and ask. So never underestimate what happens when you pray. You may think you are whispering words into the silence, but in reality, you are opening a channel between your life and the throne of heaven. And as that channel opens, wisdom begins to flow. Wisdom for the decision you are afraid to make. Wisdom for the obstacle you cannot overcome. Wisdom for the dream you don't know how to build. It is all there, in the presence of God, waiting for you. Prayer does not make God work. It makes you ready to receive what He has already worked out. Prayer does not invent solutions. It reveals them. Every answer, every direction, every step of clarity has already been written in eternity. And when you pray, you simply step into that eternal flow and receive what was always yours. Chaos, confusion, and fear are destroyed when divine wisdom enters through prayer. These three forces, chaos, confusion, and fear, are like shadows that creep into the human heart and mind, choking peace and stealing direction. They are universal experiences. Every person has felt the weight of them at some point. Chaos manifests when life seems to spiral out of control, when events unfold faster than our ability to respond, when problems multiply and answers seem far away. Confusion comes when we no longer know which way to turn, when every path seems uncertain, And when every choice feels like it could lead to disaster, fear thrives in that environment, whispering lies, paralyzing the will, and robbing people of courage. Together, they create a prison, locking the human spirit into a cycle of hesitation and defeat. But the moment divine wisdom enters, all three are shattered, because wisdom from above carries a clarity and authority that these forces cannot resist. Think about what chaos really is. It is not merely disorder in the world outside, it is disorder inside the heart. People think that if they could only rearrange their circumstances, chaos would leave. But the truth is, chaos begins within. When the soul is overwhelmed and unsettled, you can change the environment, but if your mind remains in turmoil, the chaos travels with you. Divine wisdom, however, is not dependent on external circumstances. When you pray, you invite the peace of God's wisdom into your spirit, and suddenly order begins to take shape where there was once disorder. Problems may still exist, but wisdom gives you the ability to see them in their proper perspective. What once looked like an unending storm begins to look like an opportunity for growth. What once felt like a trap begins to reveal a path forward. Chaos loses its grip when wisdom speaks. Confusion is perhaps one of the most dangerous weapons against human progress. A confused mind cannot move forward with strength. It hesitates, second guesses, and wastes energy in indecision. Confusion makes people miss opportunities because they cannot discern the right choice. It keeps them frozen while time passes them by. But when divine wisdom enters, confusion dissolves. Prayer lifts you above the maze of endless options and opinions, and it places you in the tower of God's perspective. From there, you can see the way clearly. You are no longer lost in a fog of indecision because wisdom provides clarity. Clarity is the opposite of confusion, and it comes only from God's voice. When He speaks into your spirit, the tangled knots of uncertainty begin to unravel, and the straight path emerges before your feet. Fear feeds off both chaos and confusion. When everything seems unstable and unclear, fear rises to dominate the heart. Fear is not just an emotion, it is a force that can dictate decisions, paralyze courage, and sabotage destiny. People stay in jobs they hate, relationships that are toxic, and cycles that destroy them because of fear. They fear change, they fear failure, and sometimes they even fear success. But divine wisdom destroys fear because wisdom brings light, and fear cannot survive in the light. When you pray and wisdom enters, it reminds you of who you are, who God is, and what He has already prepared for you. Fear shrinks in the presence of wisdom, because fear is based on lies, while wisdom is rooted in truth. When truth floods your heart, the lies lose their power, and courage rises to take their place. One of the most powerful things about divine wisdom is that it does not only solve problems, it changes atmospheres. You could be standing in the middle of the same storm, facing the same challenges, yet when wisdom enters, everything feels different. You no longer panic because wisdom teaches you how to respond. You no longer despair because wisdom shows you the bigger picture. You no longer tremble because wisdom gives you confidence that the outcome has already been secured. That is why people who pray and connect to divine wisdom often appear calm even when everything around them is shaking. It is not because they are blind to reality. It is because they see a greater reality through prayer. Prayer is the doorway that allows this wisdom to flow. Without prayer, people are left to fight chaos, confusion, and fear with their own strength, and their strength is never enough. They may achieve temporary relief, but the forces soon return. But prayer invites the eternal, unshakable wisdom of God to dwell within them. That wisdom acts like light breaking into darkness. Darkness has no choice but to flee, not because it wants to, but because it cannot exist where light shines. In the same way, chaos, confusion, and fear have no choice but to scatter when divine wisdom enters through prayer. Consider how many lives have been turned around by a moment of prayer that released wisdom. A person drowning in chaos suddenly sees one simple step to take, and everything begins to change. Someone paralyzed by confusion receives one clear instruction from God, and suddenly their whole direction shifts. A heart bound by fear hears one whisper of divine reassurance, and courage surges back into their soul. It does not take an elaborate formula, it takes a moment of connection. That is why prayer is so essential. It is not a ritual, it is the pipeline through which wisdom flows into our deepest struggles. Think of fear like a shadow on a wall. The shadow looks large, intimidating, and overwhelming. But the moment you bring light into the room, the shadow disappears instantly. It cannot resist the light. Prayer is that light. It turns on the illumination of wisdom that makes the shadows of fear vanish. And once you have seen fear for what it really is, a powerless shadow, you are never intimidated in the same way again. You begin to walk with boldness, knowing that fear cannot define you or direct your path. Chaos, confusion, and fear may always attempt to return because life will never be free of challenges. But the difference is this: once you know the power of prayer to release divine wisdom, you are never again helpless. You have a weapon, a lifeline, and a source greater than yourself. You learn to run not to panic but to prayer, not to confusion but to clarity, not to fear but to faith. Each time you connect, you draw from the infinite well of God's wisdom, and that wisdom equips you to silence the noise, straighten the path, and lift your heart. This is why prayer must never be treated as a last resort. It is the first response, because it is the channel through which the forces of chaos, confusion, and fear are broken. The greatest victory a person can experience is not the absence of problems, but the presence of wisdom. Problems may come, storms may rage, battles may rise, but when wisdom is with you, you remain unshaken, you are anchored, you are cleared, you are fearless. That is what prayer does. That anchors you in divine wisdom that no circumstance can overthrow. And so, the truth stands firm. Chaos, confusion, and fear are destroyed when divine wisdom enters through prayer. Not because you suddenly become stronger on your own, but because you are connected to the one who is stronger than all. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you now carry wisdom that makes every challenge an opportunity, every setback a stepping stone, and every fear a doorway to courage. When wisdom comes, everything changes, and the way wisdom comes is through prayer. Prayer doesn't only change situations, it transforms you into the person who can carry wisdom. This is one of the most overlooked truths about prayer, yet it is the very reason prayer is not just about asking for things, but about becoming something greater. People often come to prayer wanting circumstances to shift. They ask for healing, for provision, for doors to open, for obstacles to be removed. And yes, prayer has the power to move mountains. But the deeper work of prayer is not just in altering the landscape around you, it is in reshaping the heart within you. Prayer molds, refines, and transforms you into a vessel capable of receiving, handling, and applying the wisdom that God longs to give. Without that inner transformation, even the best answers could be wasted. But when you change, when prayer shapes your character, then wisdom doesn't just come to you, it flows through you. Think of how often people pray for a blessing or a breakthrough, but are not ready to handle it if it arrives. A person might pray for financial increase, but without the wisdom of stewardship, that increase could destroy them. Another might pray for influence or leadership, but without humility and integrity, that influence could corrupt them. Others pray for relationships or opportunities, but without maturity, they may sabotage the very thing they long for. God, in His infinite wisdom, does not merely hand out answers. He uses prayer as the process to prepare the person for the answer. Prayer changes you before it changes what is around you. It softens your heart, disciplines your desires, aligns your will, and strengthens your spirit so that when the wisdom of God flows, you are able to hold it without letting it slip through your fingers. Prayer transforms how you see yourself. Many live with insecurity, self-doubt, and fear, thinking they are unworthy or incapable of walking in divine wisdom. But in prayer, you encounter the voice of God that tells you who you truly are. You hear not the echo of the world that calls you weak or insignificant, but the voice of the Creator that calls you chosen, equipped, and filled with purpose. That voice changes your identity. It builds confidence not in yourself alone, but in the one who dwells within you. And when you begin to see yourself through God's eyes, you carry wisdom differently. You no longer treat it as a fragile gift you might lose, but as an inheritance you are meant to steward with strength and faith. Prayer also transforms your desires. Often what people think they want is not what they truly need. They come to God with lists of requests, but as they spend time in prayer, something begins to shift. Their hearts realign, their motives are purified. Suddenly, what they once thought was essential no longer seems so urgent. Instead, they find themselves hungering for what truly matters: peace, purpose, love, and the presence of God Himself. This realignment is a transformation of the soul, and it prepares them to receive wisdom without distortion. Because wisdom is not simply knowing what to do, it is knowing why to do it. And when your motives are purified in prayer, you use wisdom for the right reasons, not for selfish gain, but for greater purpose. Another transformation that prayer brings is patience. Human nature wants everything instantly. People cry out for wisdom, but expect it to fall like lightning into their lap without delay. But prayer teaches waiting. It teaches that timing is just as important as the answer itself. As you pray, you learn to trust God's timing, to wait without anxiety, to believe that when the wisdom comes, it will be exactly when you are ready to act upon it. That patience transforms impulsive, restless people into steady, grounded souls who can carry wisdom with responsibility. Without that patience, wisdom would be wasted because it would be acted on prematurely or without maturity. Prayer changes the way you see others. Many people live self-centered lives, only thinking of their own struggles, their own goals, their own desires. But in prayer, your heart opens to the burdens of others. You begin to feel compassion, empathy, and love that you did not generate on your own. Wisdom without love can be harsh and destructive, but wisdom with compassion is powerful and healing. When prayer transforms your heart to care for others, the wisdom you carry becomes a tool not just to advance yourself, but to lift others. And in lifting others, you step into a greater level of purpose and fulfillment than selfish ambition could ever provide. Prayer also builds resilience. Wisdom is not always easy to walk in. Sometimes the wisdom God gives you calls you to make hard decisions, to stand firm against opposition, or to walk a lonely path. Without inner strength, that wisdom could crush you. But prayer builds that strength. It transforms weakness into resilience, fear into courage, and doubt into faith. It does not simply give you the map. It gives you the strength to walk the journey. Every time you pray, you build spiritual muscles that allow you to carry the weight of divine wisdom without breaking under it. Another transformation prayer brings is humility. Divine wisdom is not meant to make you arrogant or prideful. It is meant to glorify God and bless others. But without humility, wisdom can turn into pride. People might begin to think they are the source of their own insight, forgetting the one who gave it. Prayer keeps you humble because it constantly reminds you of your dependence on God. It is in kneeling before Him that you remember wisdom is not yours by merit, but by grace. That humility protects you from the pride that could corrupt wisdom, ensuring that you carry it with purity and gratitude. Prayer also transforms your vision. Many live with narrow, limited perspectives. They only see what is in front of them, and their decisions reflect that small view. But prayer lifts your eyes. It gives you God's perspective. Suddenly you begin to see beyond the moment, beyond the obstacle, beyond the temporary struggle. You see how each piece of your life connects to a greater purpose. This expanded vision transforms not just your decisions, but your entire outlook. You are no longer tossed about by every challenge because you see the bigger picture. That is wisdom in action, and it comes from a transformed vision birthed in prayer. So, prayer is never just about changing situations. Yes, it can open doors, heal bodies, and move mountains. But its greatest work is in transforming you into the kind of person who can live in wisdom. A person who is strong enough to carry it, humble enough to steward it, compassionate enough to share it, patient enough to wait for it, and resilient enough to walk it out no matter the cost. That is why many times the situation may not change immediately, but you do. And when you change, suddenly the situation looks different because you are now equipped with wisdom to face it with strength and clarity. This is why prayer must not be treated like a transaction, as if you come to God only to get what you want and then leave. Prayer is transformation. It is the place where you are molded into someone greater than you were before. It is the fire that burns away fear, the light that drives out ignorance, and the training ground that prepares you to handle the treasures of divine wisdom. Without prayer, wisdom would slip through your hands. With prayer, you are made ready, strong, and faithful to carry it into every area of your life. Prayer doesn't only change situations, it changes you. And when you are changed, when you are transformed into a vessel of wisdom, you discover that the true miracle of prayer is not just what happens around you, but what happens within you. And once you are transformed, everything else begins to fall into place, because you have become the kind of person who can not only receive wisdom, but live it out in power and grace. When you pray, you step into the mind of God, where clarity and direction overflow. This is the mystery and the majesty of prayer. It takes you beyond the limits of your own understanding and ushers you into the thoughts of the one who knows all things. Human minds are powerful but restricted. They can analyze, imagine, and reason, but they can never see the whole picture. Every decision we make in our own strength is based on partial knowledge, on fragments of reality. We don't know the full consequences of our choices. We don't see the unseen dangers, and we cannot predict the unfolding of tomorrow. That is why so many people live with regret. They make choices based on what looks right in the moment, only to discover later that their limited vision missold them. But when you pray, you connect with the mind of God, the mind that holds the past, present, and future in perfect harmony. And in that connection, clarity floods your spirit and direction becomes clear. To step into the mind of God through prayer is to experience something far greater than human intuition. Intuition is a whisper of possibility, but divine wisdom is the roar of certainty. In prayer, the fog of confusion lifts. What once seemed complicated and tangled begins to look simple. What once felt impossible suddenly becomes attainable, because you are no longer reasoning from your own understanding, but from the eternal understanding of God. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, His ways higher than our ways. Yet through prayer, He allows us to touch His thoughts and walk in His ways. That is why prayer is never wasted. Even if you walk in confused, you walk out with clarity, because prayer aligns your limited mind with God's limitless one. Clarity is one of the most precious gifts a person can receive. Without clarity, people waste years wandering in circles, chasing dreams that do not satisfy, following paths that lead to nowhere. They invest time, energy, and resources into things that collapse because they never had direction to begin with. But with clarity, life becomes focused. Decisions become easier. Priorities fall into place. Instead of scattering energy in 1,000 directions, you channel your efforts into the one path God has designed for you. Prayer is where that clarity is born. It is where distractions are stripped away, and the voice of God rises above the noise of the world. Direction is even more powerful. You can have clarity about what you want, but still not know how to get there. Prayer does not only tell you what the destination is, it gives you the steps to reach it. Prayer is strategy. It is not vague inspiration. It is specific instruction. In the mind of God, there is a path for your life that no one else can walk. There are doors waiting to open, relationships waiting to form, opportunities waiting to be unlocked. But without direction, you may miss them. Through prayer, you not only see the destination, but also receive the wisdom to take the next step, and then the step after that, until you arrive at the place God has already prepared for you. When you step into the mind of God through prayer, fear loses its grip on your decisions. Fear thrives in uncertainty. It paralyzes you because you don't know what's ahead. But when direction overflows, you walk with confidence. You may not see the entire road, but you know the one who does, and that knowledge is enough. Each step you take is filled with peace because you know you are walking in alignment with divine wisdom. This is why people who truly pray and listen for God's wisdom often seem so bold. They are not reckless. They are confident because their steps are ordered. They know they are not guessing their way through life. They are guided by the mind of God Himself. There is a powerful transformation that happens in prayer when clarity and direction are received. Your heart begins to settle. Anxiety gives way to peace. The desperate need to control everything loosens its grip. You no longer feel as if you must figure out life by yourself because you know you are connected to the one who already has it figured out. This assurance changes the way you live. You become steady, anchored, and focused because you are no longer reacting to life. You are being led through it. That is what it means to step into the mind of God. Sometimes the clarity you receive in prayer is not a loud revelation, but a gentle shift. You may enter prayer in turmoil and leave with a quiet peace that tells you exactly what to do. Other times, direction comes as a bold conviction, a sudden knowing that compels you forward. However it comes, you recognize it because it carries a weight and authority that human reasoning cannot imitate. The wisdom of God has a quality that resonates deep within the soul. It feels like truth because it is truth. That is why when you receive clarity in prayer, you can stand on it with unshakable confidence no matter what anyone else says. The overflow of direction from the mind of God is not limited to spiritual matters alone. It touches every area of life. Prayer can give you clarity in relationships, showing you who is meant to walk with you and who is not. It can give you direction in business, revealing opportunities you would have missed and pitfalls you would have fallen into. It can give you wisdom in health, teaching you to care for your body in ways that strengthen you. It can even give you creativity, unlocking ideas and innovations that you could never have conceived on your own. When you pray, you are not just touching heaven for abstract inspiration. You are pulling down practical wisdom that shapes every detail of your daily life. One of the greatest testimonies of prayer is the way it brings order to disorder. People step into prayer rooms overwhelmed, burdened, and lost, yet when they connect with the mind of God, order begins to emerge. It is like watching a puzzle come together piece by piece. The scattered fragments of your thoughts suddenly align. The random events of your life begin to make sense. You realize that nothing was wasted, that every step has been leading you somewhere, and that your life is not a chaotic accident, but a divine design. This realization transforms not only how you see the past, but how you embrace the future. The beauty of stepping into the mind of God through prayer is that it is not reserved for a select few. It is available to every soul who humbles themselves, seeks His face, and opens their heart. You do not need extraordinary talent, wealth, or education. What you need is sincerity, faith, and the willingness to listen. And when you do, the overflow of clarity and direction will become the foundation of your life. So understand this prayer is not just speaking to God, it is entering into His thoughts. It is allowing His wisdom to replace your confusion, His clarity to replace your doubts, and His direction to replace your wandering. It is a divine exchange where your limited perspective gives way to His infinite understanding. And once you have stepped into the mind of God, once you have tasted the clarity and direction that flow there, you will never again be satisfied with stumbling blindly through life. You will hunger for that connection daily because you know that in His mind, there is always enough wisdom to guide you through every storm, every decision, and every moment of your journey. The difference between ordinary living and extraordinary destiny is found in the wisdom unlocked through prayer. This single truth carries the weight of eternity because it divides lives into two categories: those who live small, bound by the ordinary, and those who rise to fulfill an extraordinary destiny that was written for them before the foundation of the world. Every person is born with potential, yet potential alone does not guarantee fulfillment. Many die never having lived out the greatness planted inside them, not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they never tapped into divine wisdom. Prayer is the hinge that swings the door from the ordinary into the extraordinary. It is the bridge between a life of survival and a life of destiny. Ordinary living is marked by routine, by cycles of striving, and by a constant sense of limitation. People go through the motions, wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat, never truly tapping into the greater reason for which they were created. They measure their lives by comfort, by possessions, by what others say is success. Yet even when they achieve those things, they feel the emptiness of ordinary living. Why? Because their souls know there is more. Deep inside, every heart longs for significance, for a destiny that transcends the temporary. But destiny is not stumbled upon. It is not achieved by accident. It is unlocked by wisdom, and that wisdom flows only through prayer. Extraordinary destiny, on the other hand, is not about fame or riches. It is about walking in the fullness of the purpose God designed for you. It is about living a life so aligned with heaven's plan that everything you touch carries eternal weight. Ordinary people live only for themselves. Extraordinary people live for something greater. Ordinary people are shaped by circumstances. Extraordinary people shape circumstances. Ordinary people react to life. Extraordinary people direct the course of their lives with wisdom from above. The difference is not natural ability. It is the supernatural wisdom that comes through prayer. When you pray, you receive wisdom that lifts you above the limits of ordinary thinking. Ordinary thinking says, play it safe, don't take risks, stay in your lane. But wisdom from prayer says, step out, walk on the water, trust the God who called you. Ordinary thinking focuses only on what is possible by human effort. Wisdom from prayer reveals what is possible when divine power is at work. This shift is what turns ordinary individuals into extraordinary leaders, dreamers, innovators, and world changers. It is not that they are better than others. It is that they connected to the mind of God through prayer and received wisdom that others ignored. Think of the lives that testify to this truth. The great men and women who altered the course of history were not extraordinary by birth. They were ordinary people who tapped into extraordinary wisdom. They prayed when others panicked. They sought God's face when others sought human approval. They listened for divine instruction when others were distracted by the noise of the world. And because they prayed, they walked into destinies far greater than anything they could have imagined on their own. Their lives remind us that destiny is not about talent alone. It is about wisdom, and wisdom comes through prayer. Prayer unlocks creativity that ordinary minds cannot grasp. Ordinary living says, follow the pattern, do what everyone else is doing, stay within the lines. But wisdom from prayer shows you new paths, fresh ideas, innovative strategies. It gives you insight that others cannot see. That is why those who truly pray often seem ahead of their time. They are not merely clever, they are connected. They are walking in wisdom that comes from above. And that wisdom makes their lives extraordinary. Prayer also unlocks courage. Ordinary living is filled with fear, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. Fear keeps people trapped in the ordinary, unwilling to step beyond their comfort zones. But when wisdom comes through prayer, fear loses its grip. You realize that the God who gave you direction will also give you strength. You stop worrying about what people think and start focusing on what God has said. And when you live by His word, your life takes on a boldness that ordinary people cannot understand. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the wisdom to trust God above your fear. That wisdom transforms destiny. Another way prayer moves you from ordinary to extraordinary is by giving you vision. Ordinary living is short-sighted. It focuses on survival, on the next paycheck, on the next opportunity. But prayer opens your eyes to a greater horizon. You begin to see not just where you are, but where you are meant to go. You begin to recognize that every trial has a purpose, every delay has a lesson, and every moment is leading you toward destiny. That vision keeps you from being trapped in the smallness of ordinary life. You no longer drift aimlessly, you live with intention. And that intention transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Prayer also builds perseverance. Ordinary living gives up easily. It quits when things get hard, when obstacles rise, when success seems delayed. But wisdom from prayer strengthens your resolve. It teaches you that destiny is not reached in a moment, but in a lifetime of faithfulness. It gives you the stamina to endure hardship, the patience to wait for God's timing, and the resilience to rise after every fall. With that perseverance, you step into a life that outlasts the fleeting nature of ordinary living. Ordinary gives up, but extraordinary presses on because it sees the end from the beginning. Perhaps one of the greatest differences prayer makes is in how you impact others. Ordinary living is self-centered. It asks, what do I get out of this? How does this benefit me? Extraordinary destiny, however, is about others. It is about legacy, about leaving behind more than possessions, about sowing into the lives of people who will carry the impact forward. Prayer gives you the wisdom to live for more than yourself. It expands your heart, enlarges your influence, and multiplies your effect on the world. You may never be known by millions, but the lives you touch through the wisdom you live out will carry extraordinary weight. That is destiny. Prayer unlocks the wisdom that shows you who you truly are. Ordinary living convinces people they are insignificant, that they are just another face in the crowd. But in prayer, God reveals your identity. He whispers destiny into your soul. He reminds you that you were created for greatness, not the greatness of applause, but the greatness of purpose. When you hear His voice in prayer, you begin to walk differently. You stand taller, you dream bigger. You live with a sense of divine calling that makes the ordinary impossible to accept. You cannot settle for less when you have glimpsed the more that God has for you. So the difference between ordinary living and extraordinary destiny comes down to this: whether or not you unlock wisdom through prayer. Without prayer, you are left to wander, limited by human understanding, trapped in cycles of survival. With prayer, you receive clarity, courage, vision, and purpose. You are lifted out of the ordinary into the extraordinary, not because of your strength, but because of His wisdom. That is the invitation of prayer, to step out of the smallness of the ordinary and into the vastness of destiny. And so, every person stands at a crossroads each day. Will you live the ordinary life, repeating patterns, chasing temporary satisfaction, settling for less than what you were created for? Or will you kneel in prayer, open your heart, and receive the wisdom that unlocks your extraordinary destiny? The choice is yours. The path is open. Prayer is the key. And when you use that key, you will discover that your life is not meant to be ordinary. It is meant to be extraordinary, because you were created for destiny that only divine wisdom can unlock.